Lots more on Hurricane Ian because it's happening right now.
This is a day Floridians we're going to remember for the rest of their lives, especially those on the West Coast, and it's impacting the entire peninsula in a lot of different ways. This is video from Tampa Bay where the wind is actually pushing the bay out, so drying up because winds offshore pushing that water out of the bay. Tampa getting spared from some of the bigger impacts that were initially thought to come up to the Bay region, but the hurricane fortunately farther south from the highly populated Tampa Bay, St. Petersburg area. Of course, some storm surge will come back to Tampa later on as the storm tracks a little bit farther to the north, but some impacts farther south certainly being felt, and in the air as well. This was some video from the hurricane hunters as they were flying through Hurricane Ian earlier in the day today, and you can see that stadium effect with the eye wall really well, where the clouds are a lot farther apart. The eye is larger the higher up in the atmosphere compared to closer down to the ocean, where the clouds are a little bit closer together just because of that intense circulation within the storm. And the hurricane hunters today on their flight said it was one of their roughest flights ever because of the amount of turbulence that Hurricane Ian was creating as they were flying through the storm. An important reconnaissance mission in order to collect that data to allow for these forecasts as Hurricane Ian was approaching the coastline of Florida. Now, the current conditions of Ian, where we're at in terms of wind speeds. These are sustained wind speeds being observed. A lot of instruments are offline farther down to the south because of the intense winds, but there are some. Punta Gorda, one of the most intense sustained wind speeds right now, 77 miles per hour. But with that video earlier of the offshore wind pushing water out of Tampa Bay with that westerly or northerly wind pushing the water out of the bay, that's good news for farther north. But of course, with your onshore wind farther south near Fort Myers, the Punta Gorda area, Sanibel, even Naples, Florida, seeing the most intense storm surge from this large and major hurricane. Punta Gorda, 123 mile per hour wind gusts right now. Catastrophic damage certainly ongoing in the Fort Myers region. And here's a satellite loop from the past 3 hours where you can see where that eye wall made landfall a little while ago and now weakening a bit as it comes into interacting with the land. But the official landfall was at 3:05 p.m. Eastern time in Cayo Costa, an island just to the west of Fort Myers, west of Pine Island as well, with 150 mile per hour sustained winds officially and a central pressure of 941 millibars. But with that 150 mile per hour sustained wind at landfall, it ties for the 5th strongest landfalling hurricane in the United States history with the contiguous U.S. So ties with a lot of other hurricanes that made landfall at 150 miles per hour, but there have been a few stronger ones in recent memory, one being Michael back in 2018 with 155 mile per hour sustained winds. But this has a lot of similarities to Hurricane Charlie back in 2004. Here are some of those most recent hurricanes that have made landfall in the Gulf of Mexico at Category 4 or 5 strength, with Laura, Ida, and now Ian being at that 150 mile per hour threshold. So the Gulf has certainly been targeted with a lot of major hurricanes recently. So here's the track of Hurricane Ian, and here's the track of Hurricane Charlie. Charlie happened back in 2004 with a very and eerily similar track to Ian this year, intensifying to that Category 4 status pretty much at the same time and making landfall with pretty much the same central pressure and same maximum sustained winds. The biggest difference, Hurricane Ian with a much larger eye compared to the smaller eye of Hurricane Charlie in 2004. That means Ian's impacts will be much larger scale with a much wider footprint of those strong winds in the southwestern Florida area. So hurricanes making landfall in the west coast of Florida is fairly uncommon. There's only been 8 storms that have made landfall on the west coast of Florida with Category 3 status or higher since 1950, and only 4 of them in the southwestern part of the state, the other 4 up towards the Florida Panhandle. So a fairly rare event for a hurricane of this magnitude to be making landfall in this part of the world. Now, here is a radar loop from the past 12 hours or so showing where we came from with Hurricane Hurricane Ian as it made its way up towards the Fort Myers area. And it made a little bit of a jog to the east as it came onshore, allowing for the biggest impacts to be near that Fort Myers area. And of course, those small wobbles with the eye wall make the biggest difference. Here's a satellite loop really close up to that eye wall. We can see that stadium effect with the clouds moving farther apart as you go up with height, as well as even the ocean down there. So very intense storm. The eye wall, of course, the strongest part of the storm with the most lightning as well. This was part of that rapid intensification right before it made landfall. A pretty eerie look with that ring of very intense lightning right around the eye as it was just approaching the southwestern Florida coastline. The most dangerous part of a hurricane is storm surge. It's where the most fatalities are caused by when you get that wind pushing all of your ocean water onshore. And it can happen very quickly. This was on Sanibel Island, just 20 minutes apart from a camera showing that intense storm surge coming onshore. And these are catastrophic storm surge numbers that are being forecasted for this part of Florida. 12 to 18 feet of storm surge that can be exacerbated by the lay of the land, where you have these harbors or these ports where water can get funneled up. That can further intensify the storm surge. And this is one of the worst photos I've seen so far today from Fort Myers Beach of that storm surge, as well as the intense wind just causing catastrophic damage. So certainly our thoughts and prayers are with the Floridians down there, weathering the storm right now, because there's a long way to go, a lot more rain. Inland flooding will be a lot bigger of an issue for Orlando and some other parts of Central Florida.
Ongoing story for days to come.
Yes.
The hurricane's weakening over land, but this is going to go on for a long, long, long time.
Interesting perspective. I liked the comparison that you did to other storms that we're familiar with, right? That's scary stuff.
Sometimes history repeats itself, like we saw with Charlie and then with Ian this year, but this one I think might be worse, and the cleanup will go on for months and months, I'm sure.
Hurricane season was late this year.
Yes.
Charlie was in August of 04. This one was in late September. So yeah, we got a ways to go too in the hurricane season.
Thanks, Jacob.